Hey guys, welcome back to Table Torque. For a top roll, both pronation and back pressure need to be crazy strong. But how intensely should you train your pronation and back pressure? Which one needs more focus? You've probably heard that pronation is less important than back pressure. Then why does something like this happen? Curious. Pronation and back pressure are some of the most used terms in arm wrestling. First of all, I want to say, it doesn't matter whether Hermes was ready or not, Devon won that match. I've noticed whenever I show that video of Hermes losing, people say, oh, Hermes wasn't ready, he was mentally broken, and so on. Maybe that's true, but here we're looking at it from a match point of view. And I believe that even if Hermes was fully mentally ready, Devon still would have won. The practice pulls between them show that Devon was able to crack Hermes multiple times and even successfully executed the king's move. Hermes has the weapons in his arsenal, but he needs to sharpen them even more. Pronation is an inevitable part of arm wrestling, no matter what technique you use. Devon is known for his pronation, not because he has the most powerful pronation. There are still guys like Georgi and Devon who are stronger. But because he's the only one who really explored and discovered that it can be used in multiple ways, in multiple situations. In every possible technique, he incorporates pronation, which makes it extremely difficult for his opponents to deal with him. Another guy who uses the pronation efficiently is Shwethan Gasweshki. Shweth is like a mini Devon, considering the pure outside game. The lighter division is very competitive. There is Daniel, Alan Zoloev, Shwethan, Mindaugas, Artur Makarov, and all. It's all mess, like Alan Zoloev beat Artur Makarov, Daniel beats Alan, then Mindaugas beats Daniel. Then Makarov beats Mindaugas. There is a triangle going on inside the lighter division. I would say Shwethan's technique is fine enough to deal with all of the others in the list. Hermes's back pressure was strong enough to isolate Devon's arm. The back pressure was there, but Devon always managed to stop him at a certain position, and that position is a sweet spot for Devon. It's pretty hard to go sideways with an outside technique once you're stuck there. You need a lot of down pressure to pull Devon out of that position, and if you try to go sideways from there, you're basically killing your own wrist gains. Whatever degree of wrist flexion you achieved in the initial setup gets taken away once you're in that open arm position. Devon's open arm is really interesting. The kickback engages pronation more. A kickback wrist in the setup troubles a top roller because even though they can access their cup a little more, as Devon gives them some degree of it, they're actually falling into a trap. Devon's open arm top roll is a trap. Devon uses his superior pronation to set traps for opponents he knows have a lot of side pressure, or for situations where he can't directly access his own sideways strength. He sets a kickback wrist and gives his opponent a bit of side pressure. The key is, he intentionally sacrifices some elbow angle. His elbow and wrist rotation work inversely. He gives away some elbow angle, but at the same time he rotates through the wrist in the opposite direction. So his opponent feels like they're getting closer to the winning side, but in reality they're losing their wrist, or their wrist gets extended from the rotational pressure. Arm wrestle with one of your training partners and attempt to pronate through their wrist without using back pressure. Only rotation. You won't even beat a non-arm wrestler that way. That's because pronation works together with back pressure. The key idea of back pressure is to detach your opponent's elbow, while pronation is meant to attack their wrist. If one fails, your top roll fails. For example, if your pronation fails, you might still open up your opponent's elbow. But if he's a hook puller, you'll get curled in. Since your brain and muscles are set up for a top roll, that sudden change in load is often too much for your bicep to handle, because the hook puller already has full coordination of bicep, shoulder, elbow, and everything else. If it's a top roll, your pronation needs to be stronger than their cup, and at the same time your cup needs to be stronger than their pronation. If your pronation is strong but your back pressure is weak, you'll end up in a defensive position. Yes, you might crack the opponent's hand, but if they're good at pressing or transitioning, they'll rip through your elbow. Now, Devon Larratt's pronation lift is an incredible lift, but it doesn't work for everyone. It combines both pronation and back pressure at the same time. The problem is that when your pronation reaches its limit, it also limits your pure back pressure. Everyone knows the brachioradialis is a much larger and longer muscle, compared to the pronator teres. And in this lift, it's not just the pronator working, your thumb bones, tendons, and other supporting structures are also engaged. But there's only so much load they can handle. Go beyond that, and something breaks. So Devon does face limitations in gaining extra back pressure strength because it's capped by what his pronation can bear. Unless he trains back pressure separately like Hermes does, which he refuses to, we'll probably see him getting rolled by Devon again for a third time. Devon's pronation is simply overpowered compared to his back pressure. For Hermes, it's the reverse. He didn't care much about his wrist until he met Devon. Of course, he has trained pronation. You can't be a professional arm wrestler without it. But he focused way more on his back pressure. His enormous back pressure was so strong that even with weaker pronation, he could detach most opponents. That's what backed up his pronation to some extent. But the relative gap between his pronation and back pressure is huge compared to the gap between Devon's pronation and back pressure. That's why Hermes' pronation couldn't open Devon's wrist. Okay, now onwards, we're not talking about Hermes or Devon, since they are super elite pullers. In general, here's my logical calculation. For a top roll, it's about 70% back pressure and 30% pronation. And most importantly, never do the pronation lift the way Michael does. It barely works for him, so it definitely won't work for you. Doing the lift this way is useless. He may say it works for him anyway. Try the pronation lift with half of your forearm resting on the table. You'll be able to lift nearly double the weight that way. Just imagine, you can do 30 kilograms the way Devon does it, but you can't do 60 kilograms the way Michael claims 90 kilograms above air form. When you perform a pronation lift with your forearm free in the air, the pronator teres and pronator quadratus are the main movers. But at the same time, surrounding muscles, like the biceps, brachialis, and wrist flexors, are working hard just to stabilize your arm so it doesn't drift. That splits the effort, which makes your pronation strength feel lower. That's why you might max out around 30 kilograms. But when you rest your forearm on a table, the surface handles the stabilization. With your arm braced, the pronation becomes a much purer movement, where the pronators can express their strength without wasting energy on balance and control. That's why you can almost double the weight, like 60 kilograms. It's not that the pronator teres suddenly became stronger. It's just that the setup allows it to transfer force more directly and efficiently. So your actual pronation strength is closer to the 60 kilograms you get with the forearm supported, because that shows the raw capacity of your pronator muscles. The 30-kilogram lift unsupported isn't false, but it reflects functional strength in a freer, more match-like position, where stabilizers are also engaged and some power is lost to balance. Supported pronation lifts show raw muscle potential, but arm wrestling is never about isolated numbers. On the table, you need pronation while your whole arm is under stress and being pulled in different directions. That's why the free air pronation lift is what really translates to match strength. Devon might have around 120 kilograms in supported pronation, but the 75 kilograms in free air is the number that actually matters, because that shows how much power he can apply in a real fight. That's all for today. See you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you all.